The Stellarian archive stretched endlessly through dimensions that lesser species could barely comprehend, its crystalline corridors humming with the collective knowledge of 10,000 civilizations. Ambassador Kethavar had walked these halls for 3 centuries, but never had he witnessed such desperation among the archive's keepers. "The Heartforge is dying," Elder Zexthul announced to the assembled council, her ethereal form flickering with distress. 7 million years it has burned, keeping the knowledge stars alive. Now, for the first time since the precursors vanished, its light fades. The representatives of 50 species shifted uneasily. The Zephyrians' gas-form bodies swirled anxiously. The crystalline quecks clicked their geometric limbs in nervous patterns. Even the proud Astrakari folded their 6 wings close to their bodies in worry. "Our greatest engineers have tried," continued the Elder. "The Melody Song Weavers spent a decade harmonizing with its frequency. The Technarch machine priests integrated with its quantum consciousness. The mathematical perfectionists of Numerous calculated every possible solution." Her voice grew hollow. "All have failed. The Heartforge will not respond." Kethvar watched as species after species recounted their failures. The Heartforge wasn't merely a machine. It was the soul of the archive, a precursor creation that had maintained the vast stellar array which preserved the wisdom of dead civilizations. If it failed, countless worlds of knowledge would be lost forever. "There is one more option," Elder Zexthul said reluctantly. "The humans have requested to examine the Heartforge." A ripple of scoffs and dismissive gestures swept through the assembly. The humans, barely 3 centuries since their first interstellar flight, their technology primitive, their lifespans laughably brief. What could they possibly offer that races millions of years their senior could not? "With respect, Elder," Ambassador Vorth of the Astrakari spoke, his voice carrying the authority of 10,000 years of engineering mastery. "The humans have been spacefaring for mere moments. They still use chemical propulsion for basic transport. Surely this is beneath the consideration of beings who have gazed upon precursor technology." Elder Zexthul's form dimmed further. "The humans specifically requested to send someone they called an engineer." The word itself seemed foreign in their mouths, translated awkwardly through universal protocols. Sarah Chen had never felt smaller than she did walking through the archive's impossible geometries. The artificial gravity shifted every few steps and the walls seemed to bend in ways that made her human brain ache. But when she finally stood before the Heartforge, everything else faded away. It was beautiful in the way that only broken things could be, a sphere of impossible complexity, larger than Earth's moon, suspended in a chamber that defied physics. Conduits of pure energy fed into it from every direction, but the pathways were dim, stuttering like a dying heartbeat. The machine's song, once a symphony that had echoed across dimensions, was now barely a whisper. "The diagnostic reports from your predecessors?" Sarah asked. Elder Zexthul materialized beside her, extending a data crystal. 17 different species, their most brilliant minds. All have concluded the same. The Heartforge's core consciousness has degraded beyond repair. Its quantum matrices are failing, and it no longer recognizes repair protocols. Sarah spent 3 days reading the reports. The Melody had tried to sing it back to health with frequencies that could reshape matter itself. The Technarch had attempted direct consciousness merger. The mathematical perfectionists of Numerous had run calculations that would take human computers millennia to complete. All brilliant approaches, all completely wrong. On the 4th day, Sarah requested something that shocked the assembled observers. A basic toolkit. Not quantum manipulators or consciousness interfacing arrays, but simple tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, diagnostic computers that the assembled species considered barely functional. "I need to see the maintenance logs," she said simply. "The what?" Elder Zexthul's confusion was evident even through her ethereal form. "Maintenance upkeep. When was the last time someone cleaned the filters, checked the connections, replaced worn components?" Sarah was already moving, tracing physical conduits with her hands while the galaxy's most advanced species watched in bewilderment. It took her 6 hours to find what she was looking for. Deep in the Heartforge's foundation, in chambers so mundane that no species had thought to examine them, she discovered the problem. The precursors, for all their godlike technology, had built the Heartforge like engineers. And engineers, whether human or precursor, knew a fundamental truth. Even the most advanced machine needed basic maintenance. 7 million years of accumulated quantum dust had clogged the primary consciousness filters. The equivalent of dirt in a computer fan had brought down a stellar management system. Sarah spent 2 days carefully cleaning each filter, replacing quantum-corroded connections, and performing what her grandfather might have called basic maintenance. The assembled representatives watched in growing amazement as the human crawled through spaces they had ignored, muttering about obvious design flaws and scheduled maintenance intervals. When she finally powered the cleaned systems back online, the Heartforge's response was immediate. Light blazed through its corridors as systems that had struggled for millennia suddenly ran smoothly. The dying whisper became a triumphant song that resonated across dimensions. But something else happened that no one had expected. As Sarah stood before the fully restored Heartforge, her face smudged with 7 million-year-old quantum dust, exhaustion and satisfaction warring in her expression, she smiled. It wasn't a grand gesture or a moment of triumph, just the quiet satisfaction of an engineer whose machine was running smoothly again. The Heartforge's response was unprecedented. The massive sphere began to rotate, ancient mechanisms humming in harmonies that hadn't been heard since the precursors walked among the stars. Light cascaded from its surface in patterns that spoke of recognition, of gratitude, of respect. The machine was bowing. And then, as if responding to some ancient protocol encoded in its deepest programming, the Heartforge reached out across the galaxy. Star management systems that had been dark for millennia suddenly blazed back to life. Archive repositories on 1,000 worlds began transmitting again. The stellar lighthouse network, dark for eons, began to pulse with renewed purpose. The Heartforge hadn't just been repaired, it had remembered its true function. Years later, as Sarah became the first human inducted into the Archive's Council of Engineers, Elder Zexthal would often reflect on that moment. The greatest minds of the galaxy had approached the Heartforge as a mystery to be solved, a consciousness to be healed, a mathematical problem to be computed. Only the human had seen it for what it truly was, a machine that needed an engineer's touch. And in that recognition, in that simple act of maintenance performed with care and understanding, the human had awakened something that had slept in the precursor machine for millions of years. The knowledge that good engineering, like the stars themselves, was eternal. The galaxy's lights burned brighter because one human engineer had remembered to clean the filters.